Well, it's my distinct pleasure to be the interviewer for Matt Jenkins and Elyssa Shala, and two of my favorite people with the National Park Service here in the Grand Canyon. And I just want to start, there might be some people in the audience who haven't met you yet. Could you describe your current roles with the National Park Service?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Matt Jenkins. First, just thanks to everybody for giving us the opportunity to speak here, Wayne and Helen and everybody else that's coordinated the event. My name's Matt again. I'm currently the North Rim manager at Grand Canyon National Park. I started at the park in 2009 as the volunteer coordinator for the Science and Resource Management program. I did that for about a year as I developed skills to become what I wanted to become when I moved to Grand Canyon, which was a backcountry ranger. I was a backcountry ranger at Grand Canyon for the better part of a decade, and that included several years as the river patrol supervisor after we started rebuilding the river program again. And then I served several years as the North Rim District Ranger, coordinating emergency services and law enforcement on the North Rim, and then recently I've converted to the North Rim manager, overseeing operations, partnerships, and strategy on the North Rim. Some of the stuff I currently do day to day is a large project looking at the seasonality of the North Rim. There have been conversations really over the decades as to what the season should be on the North Rim. So this summer I conducted a fairly extensive research project about the feasibility of the different seasons and whether the North Rim could be open longer for visitation. I also have been part of the bison management team over the last several years. As you see our friends here, the Park Service has several different programs to reduce the size of the bison herd on the North Rim. Coordinated operations, I've been out on the field, I've worked at the corral, I've worked on partnerships with Arizona Game and Fish Department, and then I'm also part of the planning team for what'll be a legacy project on the North Rim, which is the overhaul of the utilities on the North Rim. If you see in this photo here, over on the left side, there's an orange kind of streak going through the upper parts of the canyon there. That was the rock slide that took out the pipeline after the historic winter this year. So day to day, we've got a multi-year project that's about $180 million to redo the infrastructure on the North Rim. That's water delivery, wastewater, water treatment, electric delivery, you name it. We did have to repair the historic pipeline to get the North Rim up and running this year. So that's just a little overview of my current day-to-day.
Holy cow. Elyssa.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Elyssa Shala. Most people just call me E. I serve as the North Rim and Canyon District interpreter. So that is overseeing the interpretation operations in two of the most amazing districts of the park. This photo, this was back in April, and that is with our Canyon District interpretation team. That's Kaylee Brennan in the middle and Kate Hensel on the left, two incredible rangers that we've had many years in the canyon. So I'm hoping that some of you have encountered them on the trail or gotten to get to some of their programs, both at Havasupai Gardens, Phantom, and then also up at Cottonwood. On the North Rim, we also have a fantastic interpretation team that's very seasonal in nature, so they tend to come on in early May, and they'll be there up until mid-October when the lodge closes. We've definitely had some changes in the North Rim during the COVID-19 pandemic, and so one of the big changes was just moving our operation outside. And so we have rangers at what we call the Little Ranger Roost, which is the historic little bus station stop just off the parking lot. So the rangers have loved it, and we've been outside. We're often there at the edge of the canyon when people are also getting to have their very first glimpse of the Grand Canyon. So it's a really special moment. On the left there is Ranger Doug Crispin. just an absolute pleasure to work with. This was his 51st season as a park ranger. So I get to work with the coolest people. In the middle is Jeffrey Caton. Jeffrey has since left interpretation and is now our primary snowplow operator on the North Rim. So he's doing maintenance. And on the right is Hannah Beltkamp, who is an interpreter, native of St. George, Utah, and great to have her energy up on the North Rim. But we have typically about 6 seasonal rangers on the North Rim, interns, and volunteers as well.
Wow, I didn't know there was snow on the North Rim. Which leads me to my next question. I always wanted to ski to the North Rim in the winter, but I never got to do it. I wonder what it is like to live year-round on the North Rim. I mean, that is a very special place. When I was a ranger, I heard there were only 4 people that wintered over there, but what is it like to be there during that off-season?
Sure. So I would say these days we've got between about 12 and 20 people that are up on the North Rim year-round and over winter, as we call it. And so here I am out at the gate, and we close the gate at the entrance station typically at the first really big snowstorm or around just before December 1st. And then there's also a gate out at Jacob Lake. So things get really quiet. That gate gets devastatingly cold. To open and hop out of the car. It takes a lot of teamwork and a lot of positive energy to be up there through the winter. There we are, a whole crew of us that are overwintering skiing. So we love to ski and get out and just, embrace the North Rim winters, right? If you're up there, enjoy it, have fun. There's Matt skiing out by the rim near Transept Canyon. And then there is a shot that Matt took of me on the North Kaibab Trail last winter, snowshoeing. So the furthest I had to snowshoe last year was all the way down through Red Wall Bridge. And it was, if you kind of popped through a spot, you would instantly be up to your rib cage in snow. So it made the North Kaibab not pedestrian. It was an adventure. And then this is Jesse Barden and Kaylee Brennan and Matt and I standing on top of the entrance station. And so I think this was back in March. And yeah, we just hopped out of the snowcat and we're like, why not? So
what was the official amount of snow from this past winter?
We were over 250 inches and set the record for the most on the ground at a time. And I think that was 92 inches. So yeah, pretty amazing.
So on the North Rim, a lot of folks ask us, what do we do in the winter on the North Rim? Some folks, we just tuck ourselves away up there and are hermits for 6 months, but our responsibilities are fairly vast up there to protect the park resources and protect the public. So to get in and out of the winter, the last several years, we've been modifying the way we get in and out until this historic winter. This is Jeffrey's perspective trying to plow Highway 67 so we can drive in and out. You can see it's an absolute whiteout, which is fairly normal conditions on the North Rim. Once we're actually up there, there are hundreds of buildings that require our attention through the winter. So an example of some trouble we encountered the last winter, we've got these propane tank farms that heat the buildings, and there was so much weight from the snow on the propane tank farms that it broke the lines. So those of us that are structure firefighters had to go stabilize the propane tank farms so we didn't have an explosion on the North Rim. We also scoop a lot of snow. And this last winter, the snow would go up to the roof line on some of the buildings. And we started to describe it as roof snow and ground snow. And when the roof snow and the ground snow merged, you generally had problems because then there was no place for any more snow to go. So this is one of the administrative facilities up at the North Rim, and we would break ice dams, scoop snow off the roofs, try to get snow and ice away from the electric lines, etc. The way the North Rim gets power is commercially from a company called Grand Canyon, but in the winter we'll often have power outages up to 2 weeks long. And there's a switch yard up there, and a set of generators, and keeping the generator building and the switchyard accessible was one of our primary tasks. So I'm assuming, scooped thousands of cubic feet of snow out of the switchyards, so the high voltage electrician could keep power running to the north rim so the pipes wouldn't freeze. This is our Tucker Snowcat. I think we got more miles on it last winter than the last decade combined. I personally drove the Snowcat. You can see right here, this is at the North Rim entrance station. I think I did about 15 round trip laps, just myself running the Snowcat. And in the park, the Snowcat route travels over Highway 67, but outside of the park, we can't drive on Highway 67. So we take a route across all of the meadows and then on Forest Service roads. And after some of these big storms, they would drop 3 to 5 feet of snow in the developed area. Out in the meadows, they dropped 6 to 8 feet of fresh powder. So the Snowcat would literally sink up to the cab, which was fairly exciting. We do get to experience some of the beauty of the North Rim, too, in the winter. We either ski or snowshoe, like Elyssa pointed out. And this is a trip I did out to the basin. A lot of folks are familiar with the basin in the summer. It's one of the most idyllic meadows in the park, but getting out there in the winter is fairly challenging because of the remoteness. So getting to take advantage of going to places like the basin. This is a photo looking out over Oza Butte after we got several feet of snow in the developed area, and then just spectacular sunsets over the canyon. This is, again, looking towards the south rim.
So you both have been here for over 15 years now, and winter snow is not your only adventure. And I think one of the most remarkable things I've heard about both of you is your through hike through the Grand Canyon. And I just wonder if you can talk about hiking the whole length of the Grand Canyon, and I believe you've done it on both sides. Can you tell us a little bit about that trip?
Yeah, so when we were backcountry rangers, we thought the smartest thing you could possibly do in the winter was be below the rim as much as possible, and somehow we're now on the north rim. But in the winter of 2015 to 16, Matt had just finished the Federal Law Enforcement Academy to become a permanent law enforcement ranger, and we just had finally had this big hurdle passed, and I was like, let's do something big. Let's just spend some time in the canyon, because he'd been doing all of his training the winter before in Natchez, Mississippi, along the Natchez Trace Parkway. So a little bit different than the Grand Canyon. So we dug into things and decided to start planning this trip. And, what if we hiked the length of the canyon? What if we went on like a river trip and went the opposite direction from Lake Mead towards Lee's Ferry? And just to get ready for that trip was, this incredible, it was all about the process. It was so fun. You could see on the slide before, there was my bicycle with a cache bucket on the back. And so we were putting in caches, and we ended up doing 9 different caches, and so we put all of those in. So each one of those was its own backpacking trip, which was amazing. This was out on Kelly Point, and so we're biking, and then we get to a spot where we can, drop in and hike those buckets in. That's at around 209 Mile Canyon there. And those big black clouds in the background should have been they were a hint, but we knew that the Kelly Point Road was about to close for the season, so this was our only shot to get those buckets in. And it started raining after we got the buckets in. It ended up those are my shoes on the way out. The bikes, literally, the mud, it was like Todd Seliga's photos, right? The mud just seized around the bike, and we were hiking our bikes out. It was a wild time. So just getting to prepare, doing all those cache trips, but I think also just the research that went into it, getting to read through the journals of Harvey Butchart, George Stack, Robert Benson Eshka as well was, really rewarding. And then also to talk to the, living legends and the folks that know the canyon really well.
Yeah, so the through hike started, like Elyssa pointed out, at Pierce Ferry. We went out there with a couple of our ranger friends. This is Elyssa and I at the Pierce Ferry boat ramp, and I had scouted how to get across at Pierce Canyon before, and the easiest way was to pack raft down towards the top of Pierce Ferry Rapid, where there was a breakdown in the silt cliffs. And for anybody that's seen Pierce Ferry Rapid, that's not really a good place for a pack raft. So we launched our little boats at Pierce Ferry downstream to the top of Pierce Ferry Rapid where we could get out, and we hiked the silt banks over to the mouth of Pierce Canyon where Debbie Brunchley and Eston Jones took our boats and gave us a little treat and pretty much took the rest of our stuff and wished us farewell. From that point, it'd be 30 days to try to get to Phantom Ranch. Along the way, we found some pretty remarkable just plants and the culture and animals, etc. This is what I call the agave, and it's in the shape of an infinity, and it's out by 214 Mile Canyon. This is getting into our second cache. By this point, we had been walloped by some storms under Kelly Point. For those not familiar with Kelly Point, we've mentioned it twice now. It's one of the largest promontories that Grand Canyon kind of sits around, approximately 80 river miles or so, that wraps around Kelly Point. So we're finally making our way around Kelly Point, getting to our second cache at 209 Mile Canyon here. This slide is out by Whitmore and Parashant. The storms just kept coming, and generally folks on the North Rim, we would not be too excited about these storms, but when you're doing a through hike, the more storms, the better, because it would just fill the potholes with water. The springs would run, etc., and make the hiking temperatures fairly nice. We eventually passed Two Weep, and the storms over the dome were remarkable for folks that have been out to the dome. This features about 1,000 feet tall, 800 feet tall. It's massive. Peak and pinnacle situated over the Esplanade. This is Elyssa hiking, wrapping around Kanab Point. This morning, we literally had every single layer on. We had alpine mountaineering gloves and our liner gloves, our down coats, etc., and it took a couple hours of this kind of hiking to warm up to where we could start taking our layers off. Eventually, we made it to Kanab Creek right around New Year's, and the river had pushed its way up into the mouth of Kanab Creek, and we were taking the river route, so we got to wade in the river right around New Year's.
It was like a polar plunge moment.
Yeah.
You know, it's really great.
Absolutely frigid. Folks may recognize that location. It's not technically a photo recreation, but if you've seen George Steck's Loops book, there's a photo on the cover of the ledges around Forester and Fossil Canyon. And we were so excited to get to this area that we took the long route around Powell Plateau. Most through hikers go over the Muaf Saddle. It saves several days. Instead, we really wanted to go to this location that is enshrined on the Steck book. So this is Elyssa traversing the ledges above the rapid. Eventually, we got over to North Bass. More storms, and it rained so much that you literally could hold your water bottle up in the Tapeats ledges and the water would just pour into your water bottle. So for some folks that have done these long walks, dehydration is a real issue. For us, it was really the opposite. We eventually got to Phantom Ranch, and Helen came to meet us with former Ranger Della Yurchek. They brought us Thai food, and we had 30 days to get to Phantom because I had to work a shift. So that was our timeline. I had to cover 8 days at Phantom Ranch, and the ranger that was there before us had the flu, so we camped in the campground. Actually, one of the only times I've ever camped at Phantom. And we sent in a lot of amazing food into Phantom, and we're quite antsy to get to Lee's Ferry when we left. I think it took us about 6 or 7 days to hike from Phantom to Lee's Ferry. I had done it several times at that point. This is Elyssa and Little Nanqueep climbing up to the top of the Red Wall for our final push through Marble Canyon. For folks that have hiked in Marble in the winter, there's just a tremendous amount of mud. The canyons flash frequently, and you end up having to wade in and out of these pools. And eventually we got to Lee's Ferry. It was about 37 days hiking over a 48-day time period. We spent a day out at 2 Weep hanging out with Todd, Bob Delegowski, for folks that know him, several others. And then we had a layover day at Deer Creek, and then our food fest at Phantom.
That's amazing that you had a shift at Phantom. So you were kind of on a schedule, but I know you didn't do this as a speed walk or anything, but that was pretty quick trip through the Grand Canyon, considering what other people have done. I mean, 37 days, is that, I don't know. I haven't kept track of all the through hikers, but that's pretty quick, isn't it?
That's fairly brisk.
And you had shorter days, and you had challenging weather. Congratulations to both of you.
Yeah, it was more or less a dawn to dusk affair, and I told my boss I wouldn't miss my shift. And I didn't.
Eligible for rehire.
Yeah, eligible for rehire.
And I'll preface that Matt's first time through Marble Canyon from Lee's to Phantom was with Todd Seliga, and you were like a brand new backcountry ranger. And when I like hiked down the South Kaibab Trail to meet Matt on his way out, and Todd was, speaking of very brisk walks, was continuing on west, but Matt was telling me these stories of, we walked into the night, and then there'd be this spot where one bighorn sheep maybe slept one time, and Todd would be like, this is perfect. We're going to sleep here. And so, like, we tried to tame this one down. Probably not as many dates or cashews on this trip, and it was my hard rule to stop at dark. But the next winter, this is a photo from the next year, so 2017, that December, we set out to walk on the south side and went from Jackass Canyon, and the plan was to go all the way to Havasu, but when we got to what was then Indian Garden, a huge storm was coming in. And so we did have a great time walking on the south side. There was more, it was pretty cold, you can see, but lots of mystery mud. There were storms. We were out, but it just kind of kept raining during that trip. We got towards the confluence with the LCR and definitely reached a decision point of needing to cross very quickly because it was starting to flash.
Yeah, the LCR was flash flooding, and it was either several days back up Marble Canyon, or we would swim across the LCR. And you can see here on my pack, I have a PFD, and it was a contingency for getting around Quaggat Rapid and the LCR, and lo and behold, we did ended up needing it.
Yeah, we inflated the pack rafts at the LCR, put the packs in it, and I don't think I've ever, and just had one arm over the pack raft and just swimming super hard. And so that was an adventure, a memorable moment. And then that's, we pulled out at Havasupai Gardens, and that spring we were able to go back and make the connection from Havasu over to the Bass area. So that we went with a couple friends on that trip, and incredible to get a walk below the Great Thumb that whole distance. Just want to give a little shout out to one of my favorite people, that's continued to be out there really adventuring super hard, and that's Jen Hogan. Jen Hogan's one of the Lee's Ferry Rangers, and just yesterday morning I got a satellite text from her from below Kanab Point, and she said, "Did you know that Cheetos taste awesome when you dip them in peanut butter?" So I was like, I believe you. She's the only other person that could thrive on instant mashed potatoes and tuna packets for months. But Jen has continued to spend all her time off hiking in the canyon, doing huge link ups and through hikes. So just totally inspirational.
I think extreme hikes will widen your culinary tastes. Grease and fat and all those good things like Cheetos.
Yeah.
Anything goes.
So some of you have just come in from a field trip. We're interviewing with Elyssa Shala and Matt Jenkins, North Rim Rangers, just describing their through hikes through the Grand Canyon. And next I'd like to ask you both. We'll start with you, Matt. What keeps you engaged with the Grand Canyon landscape, and what is your motivation moving forward?
Yeah, totally. So I want to talk about a few things here. I'll kind of break it up into sections. One is all of the adventures over the years, and then the second part of it is the inspiration and the teamwork through being a ranger. So I'm going to start with some of the personal trips. This is Vishnu Temple that I climbed with Rich Rudo a bunch of years ago. Rich Rudo was an early canyon mentor of mine, and through my interest and experience in these remote trips, Rich ultimately invited me on a bunch of the canyoneering exploits that he was participating in over the years. And this is Rich in 202 Mile Canyon. We did the first descent of that. That's a big canyon just downstream from Parashant. And through these trips I did with Rich, we ended up really going all over the place, and canyoneering, pack rafting, climbing, etc. This is me on a early pack rafting trip. It was a patrol actually that we did from Lee's Ferry to Nanqueep, and this has a funny story associated with it. We were canyoneering and pack rafting between the two, and for work trips, you have to have two forms of communication. And we were on day 2 or 3, I can't remember exactly, and we had just rappelled through Shinnemoo Canyon, 29 Mile Canyon, and we were going to continue on our way to our next destination. And I found out that our satellite device had broken somehow or wouldn't transmit. And that's kind of a no-go because in Marble Canyon, you can't talk on the radio. So we're a little bit panicked, kind of in the middle of nowhere, not so much because we're in trouble, but we're going to miss our check-ins. And for all the rangers in here, if you miss 2 check-ins that the helicopter's coming, I do not want a rescue named after me. Now I've got 1.5, but at the time I was adamant about not getting a rescue. And one of the things I always appreciate about being down on the river is the river community. And Fred from Azra was on a personal family motor trip, and they come down on their motor rigs, and he could tell that we were looking for some help. And he pulled over and asked what we need. I'm like, can we just use your satellite phone? And he's like, sure, yeah, no problem. So I call up to the South Rim, and I say, what's going on? And the ranger at the time had this harebrained idea that we'd kind of hike out to the rim in the middle of nowhere, and they'd eventually pick us up. They had no timing. And I knew, I'm like, well, if we can get to Nanqueep, I can get on the radio, and then we'll be good, and we can hike to the North Rim as planned. But it's about 20-something river miles, and it was already early afternoon. I'm doing the math. I'm like, well, I think we can make it to Nanqueep in our pack rafts if we scoot now, kind of thing. So I convinced them that we would be able to go to Nanqueep, and I took all of those slides out of this slideshow. It's kind of for a different day, but I've got some great photos of us getting to the mouth of Nanqueep at maybe a little bit after dark, and running up onto the ridge by the cultural sites there. That's the first place you can really get on the radio, and getting out to the South Rim. And we made it, we're good. Then it took 2 more days to hike out of Nanqueep because of a different little debacle. I did a lot of packraft trainings over the year for the rangers. This happens to be Elyssa at Lee's Ferry and one of those trainings. And the goal of some of that was to really help get the rangers out into more remote areas doing resource work. Some of you may know who that is. I was on a caving pack rafting trip for work and happened to run into former Superintendent Ubaraga, who was intrigued by the pack rafts at the time. So I traded him my pack raft for a little bit while he tootled down the river, and I got to ride in the Grand Canyon Association boat. That was a great trip and fun running into Dave down there. Eventually, these trips became more interdisciplinary. This is former Grand Canyon Ranger Kate McHugh. Over the years, I developed a canyoneering monitoring protocol to try to bring some of this stuff back to the park so the park can make more informed decisions about how to manage the backcountry resources. And then Kate kind of built on my canyoneering work, and for her graduate work, she did a climbing monitoring program. Is Keith Peterson. I got really interested in climbing. I was always a climber, but never really did it much in the Grand Canyon. This is the battle turret. It's that little spire off the north end of the battleship. Keith and I did a number of climbing trips together. One of my favorite ones was Zoroaster Temple. I'm sure a couple folks in the room have probably climbed that. We would go out on 2 teams of 2 because I was interested in doing photography on a lot of these trips. So we climbed up above on this last pitch, and this is mountain guide Jeff Unger. He guides a lot in the Sierra and in Red Rock, and he was helping Kate and I do a monitoring patrol of the sky crack here. There's myself on Mount Hayden, Buddha Temple, and eventually these just kept getting more and more remote, kind of culminating in a ascent of the Tooth Rock. It's above Lee's Ferry. It's thought to be one of the biggest sandstone spires in the desert. Albert Newman put up a route called More Sand Than Stone. That should be a clue. It was quite the adventure. Eventually started putting up new routes. This is my buddy, former paramedic, now PA, living in Seattle, Solomon Crevens. If you look closely at that photo, you can see the Bright Angel Trail down there. Yeah, exactly. And some of you may be familiar with that cliff. Solomon and I call it Lookout Buttress. The interesting history there, we put up a new route through Lookout Buttress. It's literally below Lookout Studio, right above 1.5 Mile Rest House. The first route we put up goes through the whole cliff band, 5 pitches. But we found another line when we were there, and it ended up being an abandoned free climb or A-climb effort from former ranger Keith Lober, if you're familiar with that name. He went on to be the search and rescue coordinator at Yosemite. This is Solomon and Garden Creek, and Solomon and I's kind of exploits, he was kind of my main adventure partner right before I moved to the North Rim, culminated in a big trip. I was interested in these ideas of desert triathlons, but not actual triathlons. I always wanted to combine climbing, canyoneering, and pack rafting, so we came up with all these loops and adventures, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, the Sinyala Loop. We came down Havasu and climbed out. This is Solomon climbing out of Havasu across from Beaver Falls and the Red Wall. It's some pretty intense exposure there. And then we climbed Mount Sinyala and rappelled through Sinyala Canyon, where I had one of a couple notorious, for me, rattlesnake encounters. During the last rappel, I think it's about 10 rappels to get through Sinyala Canyon, and I'm rappelling to the last ledge system above the river, and I'm getting off the rope so Solomon can rappel down. And I look at the ledge right in front of my face, and there's literally a pink rattlesnake about 6 inches from my eyes. And I've never jumped so far so fast on a narrow ledge. And Solomon and I got separated by this rattlesnake who refused to move. And it was upset for about 30, 45 minutes. And Solomon was stuck up at the top of this rappel until the rattlesnake would go somewhere, and we couldn't coax it. So we eventually devised this scheme to get Solomon down and pendulum him over around the rattlesnake, who was just the whole time. And we made it to the mouth of Sinyala. I think our heart rates were about 160, 170, just at rest. And then we had the pack raft down the Havasu. And the funny thing about pack rafting the Havasu is if you miss the takeout in the mouth of Havasu, it's a long road to nowhere in a pack raft. So we had all these contingency plans if there were boats full at the mouth, and we're going to jump onto the boats. And thankfully, there was nobody there, and it was fine. As you can tell, I'm a photographer and get a lot of inspiration through the canyon. That's me shooting some climbing photography. Yeah, I think we're still okay on time. I'm going to click through these a little bit faster. So going on to the work stuff, Todd Seliga, you heard him talk. Todd Seliga is actually the ranger who helped get me to Grand Canyon. I worked with him as the volunteer coordinator, and when I became a LE ranger, he convinced the acting chief ranger at the time, Mike McGinnis, to hire me. Todd was the acting North Rim district ranger. They somehow coaxed him out of 2 weeks to do that. I convinced he will never do that again. a job I ended up later holding, but Mike McGinnis called me for my first ranger job while Elyssa and I were driving. And the interview went something along the lines of, do you want a job? I'm like, I would like a job. He's like, okay, I'll submit your paperwork tomorrow. I'm like, this is clearly a busy guy. So click through some of these pretty quick. As a backcountry ranger, I was really interested in resource protection, whether it was wildlife or cultural resources. This is a baby condor out by Trinity, a group of bighorn sheep in Fossil Canyon, humpback chub by Vasey's. That's a more recent photo. But I did a lot of emergency services over the years. This is an evacuation of the North Rim due to the Mangum fire. That's a story in itself, but I was having breakfast one morning and got a call saying that the utility on the highway was going to be threatened by lunch. You probably should get people off the North Rim. I was pretty new to the job, like a couple weeks into the new job. Like, okay, this is going to be entertaining. I was on the Intermountain Region Special Event Team. I'm on the right side there, second in. This is a protection detail for President Barack Obama at Carlsbad. It's the same group at Grand Canyon. And because of my experience with this group, got to do a lot of VIP trips, including with several secretaries of the Interior. This is Della, Yurchek, Elyssa, and I with Ryan Zinke down at the river. That was an interesting day. I also got to take former Secretary Jewel to REI. This is our North Rim team. Just a lot of great stories with them over the years, working on the river. This is operating the Zodiac at National Canyon during the Schwab search several years ago, flying in for that. A lot of short haul. I'm going to skip through these to not take too much time. This is a short haul off the North Kaibab Trail. We opened late that year on the North Rim, and normally when you swing the gates at the North Rim, it's like you are never closed. It takes about 2 hours, and then every parking spot is full, and people are doing silly things. And this gentleman broke his leg on the North Kaibab right below Supai Tunnel. It was like 9:30 in the morning, opening day. It's like, okay, here we go. So we go down there, and he was a fairly large individual who was scared of heights. And I told him, well, look, the only way to get you out of here is on a rope hanging below a helicopter. And that freaked him out quite a bit. So I bring a paramedic down, and they ease the anxiety a little bit. And the helicopter comes in, and because of the location, they had to use a fairly long rope, a 250-foot rope below the helicopter. And it was too hot, so we couldn't go to the North Rim. So we had to take him all the way to Cottonwood. And he started screaming shortly after we took off. And I kind of started yelling back at him. This is, also right after COVID had started. So I've got a N95 mask on. N95, all my helicopter PPE, ropes, helicopter, et cetera. I'm like, open your eyes, this is amazing. We're flying over Roaring Springs. And he finally peeks an eye open, and he just says, this is amazing, and puts his arms out like a plane. As the North Rim team training at the lodge, technical rescue, you can see a bunch of small little yellow shirts. Structure fire, and one of the things to kind of bring this back to Elyssa and I is we've gotten to do a lot of this stuff together. So to be part of the team at Grand Canyon on the North Rim, we don't really have that many structure firefighters, and a decade ago I would have sworn I'd never do structure fire, but here I am. Or here's Elyssa actually, structure fire training. And here's Elyssa and I on our anniversary coming back from Kelly Point during the Robert search. So on to Elyssa.
Yeah, waking up in a dirt cattle tank was, I was like, I married adventure. And when you get the chance to literally put out a dumpster fire at work, that's pretty awesome. Things I never thought that I would do. For me, I think part of being here has also been the opportunity for adventure and just, seeing the landscape, seeing what's out there, experiencing what it's like to move through them has been really huge. So in my non-work time, I love running. This is out at Red Rock Canyon near Las Vegas. I've done, hundreds of miles out there. This was in Silverton, Colorado, Matt and I ran the Silverton Alpine Marathon, preparing for a trail running trip in Nepal. It's great when people go on the river. Matt did a ton of work trips on the river, and you get a lot of time to yourself. You start thinking about things. One time I was like, what if we just went running in Nepal? And so I booked the trip, and when he got off the river, I was like, guess what we're gonna do? And so we had a lot of training to do for that. You know, the time on the North Rim, I love the Kaibab Plateau. I love getting to run, especially on the Arizona Trail up there. So every autumn, the Arizona Trail Association does an event called AZT in a Day, where you can sign up for different segments. And so every year I try to challenge myself to do something new or different, and you know, just running through those meadows is unbelievable. I've met some of my best friends through trail running on the North Rim, and this is our incredible volunteer on the North Rim, John Mullenauer, and he's just an absolutely prolific ultra runner and inspiration. And a couple years ago, they canceled the North Rim Arizona Trail Half Marathon because of the extreme monsoon weather, and so we put on our own event, and it was called the Monsoon Meander. And Matt was making grilled cheese in the van, and John won the most needy award, and it was a great day. Some of my best memories. We have a strong North Rim cross-country team, and so here we're out at the beginning of the season once the snow's melted, getting back on the bridle path, and it's always a little hard after the snow to get back in shape up at 8,000 feet. But one of those runners will be in the New York City Marathon tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, running, you never know who's gonna show up. This was, I think, during 2018, during the last shutdown. We'd been in the Emergency Operations Center for, you know, it felt like days, weeks, and there's no windows in there. And I asked my section chief in the plan section, Debbie, I was like, can I leave and just go run this race up by Page in the canyons? And went up there, and it was icy and snowy, but that's Jim Walmsley. I am not fast. Jim Walmsley is one of the greatest runners in American history. So you never know who you get to end up with at these trail races. In addition to things like racing, I love just my solo time on the trail, or just getting to talk with visitors on the trails. You know, can spend hours and hours. You know, I think I've been with Wayne and Helen at Havasupai Gardens before, where I've gotten there and it's like you can't even talk anymore because you're like, I just talked to 450 people, you know, on the Upper Bright Angel. One of, you know, my greatest mentors in the canyon over the years was Mandy Toy. And she was a ranger at Phantom for a really long time, and then moved up to the North Rim. And when she moved to the North Rim, as the district interpreter, I'd said, please supervise me. Will you please supervise the canyon too? Because I was full-time down there, and she was willing to take that on, and you know, now I'm in her position. But she's now the chief of interp out at the Natchez Trace Parkway. But she really taught me that you can be creative, you can be yourself, and also be, you know, a good representative for the Park Service. One of the projects that I did during my time in the canyon was something that we called Towers and Type. And I love like analog things, old things, objects, and I always loved typewriters. And so Matt and I were at Havasupai Gardens for a week during the holidays, and that was in 2017. And I had this typewriter that I'd bought back in Iowa and like brought with me on a road trip and brought it back to the canyon, and finally got a ribbon, and I said like, hey Matt, like let's do this thing. Like let's hike this typewriter out to Plateau Point. We found this old chair behind the dumpster and this little table. So Matt strapped the chair and the table to his pack, and I carried the typewriter and just left a little note out there that said like, hey, it's like you've come a long ways. Congratulations, take a seat. what's this moment mean to you? You know, as interpretive rangers, when I got to Grand Canyon in 2009 as a volunteer interpreter, you know, it was really the art of me developing programs of different lengths, 20 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, where I'm telling you things, all the amazing things that I know. But there's been this exciting shift in interpretation in the Park Service during my time, where there's, you know, we say we've moved away from the sage on the stage to be the guide on the side. So just providing space for visitors to share and make their own connections and expressions. I left this out there at Plateau Point. It was this incredible weather over New Year's, and I was out there for like 72 hours. And, you know, one night in the campground, they were like, it's out of paper. You need to get more paper out to the typewriter. So I ran some paper out, you know, and I had no plans for this, but read the responses, and like I laughed, I cried, like it was unbelievable. And so I decided to do a bunch of photography and kind of curate these into a webpage to share more broadly, because I was like, people need to see that, like, this is unbelievable. And the webpage, the project ended up getting quite a bit of recognition. The regional Intermountain Region Freeman Tilden Award, and then it also became the national recipient. So that's the biggest honor that can be bestowed upon an interpreter in the Park Service. And, you know, it was absolutely an honor for me, but it meant more for all the people, you know, Mandy, all these people that had, John Rudy, Katie Bliss, that had helped shape this ethic around providing space for others to share and connect. So it was a huge honor for the park, the first Tilden Award for Grand Canyon National Park, and just this bridge into this new ideas around interpretation. More recently, one of the projects that I've been so excited about to be engaged with is through the park's Intertribal Working Group. And a big project has been the renaming of Indian Garden to Havasupai Gardens, which happened in the past year. And so along with the renaming of Havasupai Gardens has been the redesign or complete new design of interpretive materials for Havasupai Gardens. So this was during the renaming ceremony that happened down at the gardens back in May. That's James Aquala and Carletta Toulouse. And there was a ceremony down there, and these are some of the interpretive signage and posters that we've been working on, and that's working with Carmen Kraus, our visual information specialist. So we're working on some signage, and what we're doing here is looking at plants and animals and trying to make this signage bilingual. It's important to the Havasupai that in the future they will be able to have members of the tribe, youth come down to this site, know the history, but also see their language there. So that's been a cool project. It's ongoing. We're incredibly grateful for the support from Grand Canyon Conservancy on this type of collaboration. That's Ophelia Wadahamaji Corliss putting up a draft of her poster, and it says, "No past tense allowed." And you know, just incredible to get to be on the sidelines and helping facilitate this work. This was a hike. You can see Superintendent Keeble and Secretary Holland, Deborah Holland, there. We got the chance to hike with the Secretary down to Supai this summer, and this was right in advance of the designation of the ancestral footprints of Grand Canyon National Monument. So on that hike, I had the opportunity to hike in a set of those posters we've been working on as well. So the coolest thing, one of my most amazing memories, Matt mentioned Robert Delagowski, Bob Delagowski, incredible watercolorist and artist. I met him many years during the Celebration of Art, Plein Air Painting Festival. He would hike down to the gardens. He'd hike in before the celebration just to bring Diet Coke and put it, and we'd sneak it into the fridge. So he had plenty of Diet Coke, but he taught Matt and I that the gold standard when you hike out of the canyon no matter how long you've been down there, how tired you are, you run the last switchback. Doesn't matter which trail it is, you run the last switchback. So I told the secretary that. We got to the last switchback. She started running. Superintendent Keeble started running. The whole team started running, and it was amazing. Such a great memory. Some of the most rewarding other projects that I've done in the canyon have been related to external partnerships, and this is a project with the Grand Canyon Hikers and Backpackers Association. I've worked with them for 11 years. We've painted every single ranger station in the corridor. These folks have taught me so many life skills, so much enthusiasm. They not only hike into the canyon, they do it to come work their tails off for a week straight, and we've really made tangible differences in the canyon. That's Jerome Chavez, the sewage treatment plant operator at Phantom, with Mike and Kathy Hayes. Mike and Kathy drive all the way out from Western New York twice a year. We rebuilt that deck on Jerome's house right above Bright Angel Creek. The thing with the deck was, in all these projects, you were always missing something critical that you had to have. And in that case, we ran out of decking screws. So I called Eston Jones, little boy Jones, up at Havasupai Gardens, and I said, do you have deck screws? If you do, I'm gonna run up there tomorrow morning, grab these screws. It was a Saturday, October. It's crazy on the trail. It's gonna be a stealth operation. And then I'm gonna run back down to the garden so we can finish this project. I get to the gardens, and that's what Eston had come up with. He said, not only do we have deck screws, but I made you this helmet. So it's gonna be perfect. And I tried it out, and I was like, this is not a stealth operation. Like, this is ridiculous. I didn't wear my uniform for a purpose. And so we came up with these, I was like, what would a runner do? They would make little hand things, right? And so we put the screws, we weighed the screws. My hands were absolutely numb by the time I got back down, but we did finish that project, and just one of so many awesome projects at Phantom with GCHBA, with Shores, doing deferred maintenance.
Wow. You two are amazing. And I hope you've noticed, this has gone unsaid, but these are probably the two youngest people we've ever done a oral history with. And it's part of the mission of the Grand Canyon Historical Society to not just interview people like Dave Mortensen and myself, who might answer questions from an interviewer like, I don't remember. These people are in the midst of their careers, and it's very important for us, moving forward, to collect things from people who are still in their careers before they get like Dave and I and can't remember so many things. So thank you. It's not usual for younger people to be in something like this, but I wanted to tell the audience that that's one of the missions of the oral history program. Lastly, today, the two of you have made so many contributions in your short time here at Grand Canyon. In the time we have remaining, what does it mean to the two of you collectively being here for those years? What has it meant to you personally to be here?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Wayne. I wanted to start a little bit with just where we've come from a little bit. Elyssa and I met before joining the Park Service. We actually had careers as musicians before becoming rangers. And so a few photos here just for some context. We traveled all over, really, Asia, Europe, the United States, performing experimental avant-garde and contemporary classical music. This is a photo of me doing kind of an early piece with robotics, percussion, and artificial intelligence. This is a performance of Karl-Heinz Stockhausen's Microphony. That's me playing the flugelhorn into a tam-tam. This is Elyssa in Europe, playing a John Luther Adams piece for tam-tam, playing with Slagwerk Den Haag, that's the percussion group The Hague, an experimental piece. This is a piece Elyssa and I did together. We called that the circus cart. It was a piece by Mark Applebaum.
It was 38 seconds long, and it called for 106 instruments, of which it would only say must be wood or must ring for a long time. It was such a fun project. We went to Turkey, to Istanbul, and went to the bazaars there and found all these cool things, and then even added a Dutch bicycle wheel off the top.
Yeah, this is playing in Holland at one of the big concert halls. An early application of desert plants. Those are cactus. And
Where did you get cactus in Holland?
it was extremely hard to find cactus. And as you can see there, those are amplified cactus. Those are contact microphones. So we were always inspired through creativity and collaboration.
And typewriter.
It was I wish I brought that typewriter back. It was had a Dutch keyboard, and it was orange.
Yeah, and so we brought a lot of these ideas to the Park Service, and one of the reasons we pivoted out of that career is we finished grad school and we're working professionally during the previous economic collapse around 2008, 2009. So there's a lot of financial pressure, and needless to say, doing percussion pieces for balloons and typewriters and amplified cactus is not exactly lucrative. And I made more money as a volunteer coordinator. So, we say all that because a lot of these ideas about working together and thinking outside of the box really translate to work in the Park Service, and working with a lot of fabulous people on challenging problems and austere circumstances really did parallel our careers in music. And there are some people along the way that we wanted to kind of point out that were influential.
Yeah, and that's Debbie Brenchley. She was the former Canyon District Ranger. She's absolutely been a mentor to us both in really different ways. Broke so much ground as a backcountry ranger. For me also, she was an incredible mentor in incident management and planning. She definitely taught me you show up. Even on the days that seem kind of dreary, you always show up. There are always ways that you can help. And this was a great time on the Bright Angel Trail with Debbie, and that was Ed's first hike into the canyon. I just want to point out the boots. I don't think you've hiked in the canyon in those boots again, did you? I taught him not to. That's right.
Yeah, those are Vietnam-era boots, aren't they?
Well, I wasn't in Vietnam, but I got those boots in Korea.
I used to have boots like that. You want to sell yours?
I saw Ed hike all the way into Havasu in sandals, which means he has become part of the canyon, right? That's a very, very select few can pull that off. But we've really appreciated our time working with Superintendent Keeble, and I think, you've taught me to keep having fun, and make the best decisions that can be made. This was my handbag the day that we got married. It looks like a vintage book. It was a vintage book. And that's the deal. I married adventure. It's been good.
Wow, thank you both so much. This has been so enjoyable to have you both up here. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I can't believe it, but that was the last of the daytime programs.